Welcome to the deep dive. We've got quite a stack of sources in front of us today, and they seem to paint a really broad picture of what's happening in cybersecurity right now.
They really do, yeah. We're going to be digging into, well, all sorts of things from the really technical stuff like system
The
vulnerabilities.
nitty-gritty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And new malware campaigns too. But then also zooming out to like international law enforcement
Oh,
actions, state-sponsored attacks, and even a look at the kind of cultural challenges inside the industry.
that's quite a range. So our mission here is basically to unpack all this, pull out the key insights, and figure out what it all means for you. Let's jump right in.
Okay, sounds good. Let's start maybe deep in the technical weeds.
Mhm.
There's this report from the Qualys Threat Research Unit about some new flaws they found in Linux.
Oh, right. I saw that. These were the information disclosure ones, tracked as CVE 2025-5054 and 4598.
That's them, yeah. And what's sort of notable is their type.
Hmm.
They're race condition bugs.
Race conditions. Okay. Can you remind us what that means exactly?
Sure. It's basically when the outcome depends on the unpredictable timing of different events, like two processes trying to access the same thing at nearly the same time, and it creates an unexpected, potentially insecure situation because of that timing conflict.
Got it. And where did they actually find these timing bugs?
In the core dump handlers, so components like a port and system core dump, these are the bits of the system that, create a memory snapshot when a program crashes.
Like a black box recorder for software crashes.
Exactly. And those snapshots, those core dumps, can sometimes contain, well, sensitive information that was in memory at the time of the crash.
Right. Things you wouldn't want exposed. And which Linux versions are we talking about?
The report flags some major ones: Ubuntu, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and Fedora. So pretty widely used.
Yeah, definitely. So if you're managing systems running those, this is something to pay attention to. What's the real risk here with these race conditions?
Well, the main concern is that an attacker who already has some kind of foothold on the system, maybe just a low-privileged user, could potentially exploit this timing flaw to get access to sensitive data within those core dumps.
Huh.
The sources specifically mention things like potentially password hashes being exposed.
Wow. Okay, so even these fundamental parts of the OS need constant scrutiny for these subtle flaws. Really highlights the need for patching.
Absolutely, diligence is key.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. One of the sources brought some good news, actually, a law enforcement win.
Yes, that was encouraging to see. A big multinational operation that successfully took down an online cybercrime group.
And this wasn't just going after hackers, but a service they use, right?
Exactly. This group was providing what are called crypting services.
Crypting services. What does that involve?
Basically, they take malware submitted by criminals and obfuscate it. They
Yeah.
change the code signature, encrypt parts of it, just make it look different so that it can slip past standard security software like your antivirus.
Ah, so it's like a malware disguise service?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
It helps the bad guys stay hidden. So taking down a service like this disrupts a whole chunk of the cybercrime ecosystem. It hits their supply chain.
And the U.S. Department of Justice was involved?
They were. The DOJ announced late May 2025 that they'd seized 4 domains and the servers tied to this service.
Right.
It just shows that there are these ongoing coordinated efforts happening, internationally to dismantle the infrastructure that enables cybercrime.
Yeah,
Targeting these services is a smart way to have a broader impact.
definitely good to hear about those successes. But, of course, as one tool gets shut down, attackers are always cooking up new threats. Which brings us to some new malware detailed in the sources.
Ah, yes. EDDIESTEALER.
EDDIESTEALER, catchy name. What's technically interesting about this particular info stealer?
Well, one thing the reports highlight is that it's built using Rust.
Oh, okay. We are seeing more malware written in things like Rust or Go, aren't we?
We are, yeah. It can sometimes make the analysis a bit trickier for researchers compared to, say, malware written in C++ or C#. It's just a different beast to reverse engineer.
And how is EDDIESTEALER actually getting onto people's computers? There was a specific trick mentioned.
Right, it uses something called the click fix tactic. It starts with these fake capDTAJ pages.
The prove you're not a robot things.
Exactly. But instead of a real capDTAJ, the page tricks you into clicking something that actually downloads and runs a malicious PowerShell script. Very sneaky social engineering.
And that PowerShell script then pulls down the main EDDIESTEALER payload, I assume?
Precisely. And once it's running, well, it's an info stealer. Its job is to grab as much sensitive data as possible from the infected machine.
What kind of data specifically?
The sources highlighted one particularly nasty capability. It can apparently bypass Chrome's app-bound encryption.
Whoa, Chrome's app-bound encryption. That sounds important. Why target that specifically?
It is important. That's a security feature Google Chrome uses to protect really sensitive browser data. We're talking stored passwords, cookies, your browsing history, credit card info stored for autofill.
Basically the crown jewels of browser data.
Absolutely. Hugely valuable stuff for criminals. Yeah. So if EDDIESTEALER can get around that protection, it can scrape all that data and send it back to the attackers. It can be used for all sorts of things: identity theft, accessing other accounts, selling it online.
Man, so they're constantly refining not just how they get in, but how they grab the most valuable loot once they are in?
It's a continuous evolution, yeah, adapting to new defenses.
Okay, next up, the sources also touched on state-sponsored activity. That's a different kind of threat altogether.
It really is. That particular report comes from Trend Micro, and they're attributing a campaign to a threat actor they linked to China.
And this isn't just like a single incident. It's part of something bigger.
That's right. Trend Micro describes it as part of a broader set of attacks going on since at least 2023. And it's geographically widespread, too, hitting organizations across Asia, India, Southeast Asia, and even in Brazil.
Wow, okay. What systems were these attackers focusing on?
The main targets mentioned were critical enterprise systems, specifically SAP NetWeaver and SQL Server.
Big platforms used by lots of large organizations for core functions, right?
Exactly, running business operations, storing huge amounts of potentially sensitive data, high-value targets.
And how were the attackers getting initial access? What was the main method?
According to the sources, the primary technique was exploiting SQL injection vulnerabilities.
SQL injection, so finding flaws in web applications.
Precisely, finding weaknesses in public-facing web apps that connect to a back-end SQL database. They exploit that web app flaw to then gain unauthorized access to the SQL server and its data.
Ah, so they're not necessarily brute forcing the database server itself, but finding a way in through a connected, maybe less secure application.
Often, yes. It really underscores how attackers probe for the weakest point in the chain. This kind of persistent, targeted campaign against valuable enterprise data, using these web app flaws across multiple regions, it really hammers home the need for securing not just the back-end servers, but all the applications that touch them. And of course, patching those known vulnerabilities diligently.
Makes total sense. Okay, finally, there was a really different kind of insight in our sources, more about the human and organizational side of cybersecurity.
Yeah, this was quite interesting. It features Jason Elrod, who's the CISO over at Multicare Health System. He gives a really candid take on the challenges in the healthcare sector.
And he had that quote that just jumped right off the page. Healthcare loves to walk backwards into the future.
Yeah, that's a powerful line, isn't it? He uses it to describe the struggle of trying to secure and modernize IT environments that are often, weighed down by decades of legacy technology and processes. It paints a picture of trying to move forward while constantly being pulled back by the past.
The summary also mentioned a shift. Something about moving from a department of no to a culture of yes. What's behind that?
Well, that reflects a common struggle for security teams everywhere, really. Historically, security often got the reputation of just blocking things, saying no to new projects because of risk.
Right. The fun police, basically.
Kind of, yeah. The goal now for many security leaders is to shift towards enabling the business securely, creating a culture of yes, where security is built in from the start, not just bolted on as an afterthought or a roadblock. But Elrod's point is that achieving this in a sector like healthcare, with its complex legacy issues, is especially challenging.
And what did he say was the core problem leading to that feeling of walking backwards?
He mentioned a sort of lack of preparedness, being too focused on dealing with today's fires rather than looking ahead and anticipating things that could have been foreseen. That failure to be proactive, to build security into future plans, that's what keeps organizations stuck in a reactive loop, always playing catch-up.
That sounds like a challenge that goes way beyond just healthcare.
Oh, absolutely.
That struggle with old tech, the perception of security as a blocker, the difficulty of truly being proactive instead of just reacting. I mean, that must resonate in tons of industries.
It's a universal headache in IT and security, for sure. It really highlights that cybersecurity isn't just about fighting external hackers. It's also about navigating internal politics, changing organizational culture, and dealing with that mountain of technical debt.
Okay, wow. So we've really covered a lot of ground here. From those subtle race conditions deep inside Linux and new malware like EDDIESTEALER, using clever tricks to bypass browser security.
Right. And then the positive news about law enforcement coordination taking down cybercrime tools,
Yeah.
contrasted with sophisticated state actors
hmm
persistently targeting big enterprise systems through web apps.
And then wrapping up with that really insightful look at the internal organizational struggle summed up by that walking backwards comment.
Yeah, taken together, I think these sources really paint a picture of just how dynamic the threat landscape is. It demands defense on multiple fronts. You need the technical fixes for vulnerabilities. You need awareness of the latest malware tricks. You need global cooperation against crime infrastructure. And you need to tackle those internal hurdles, the legacy systems, the company culture.
It definitely shows there's no single magic solution, right? And, thinking about that CISO's comment again, that walking backwards into the future and considering how persistent and adaptable all these threats are, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What does it actually take for an organization, or even just for us as individuals, to genuinely get ahead of the curve, to move forward proactively instead of constantly feeling like we're being dragged back by this relentless pace of change?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? A real challenge for everyone.
It is indeed. Well, thank you for sharing these sources with us and for joining us on this deep dive today.